Əgər insan kimi yaşamaq istəyirik, yəni bunun üçün xəzinə verəcəyik. Bu çarəsizdir. Çox sağ olun.
You are listening to AHRAZPod, a podcast by the Association of the Human Rights for the Azerbaijani People in Iran. I am Sina.
And I am Behzad.
We will be with you with the recent human rights violation reports for Azerbaijani people in Iran with our short informative podcasts. To get updates on human rights violations in Iran, please follow AHRAZ's social media accounts.
You are listening to AHRAZPod.
Hi everyone. After a break, we are here again with you to discuss the human rights situation in Iran. In the last couple of weeks, we faced a huge amount of spams, reports, and cyber attacks to our Instagram and Twitter account. That is why we could not publish any updates or podcasts. But here we are again, stronger than before to amplify the voice of the underrepresented in Iran. Today, me and Behzad will discuss the children's fundamental rights and violations of civil rights in Iran. We have got interviews and reports from the families within Iran that they struggle to benefit from the very basic rights as like name choice for their children and so on. Can you briefly give us information regarding the legal framework of the child and citizen rights in Iran or in the international arena?
Hi, Sina. We have several legal grounds related to this issue. The first one is the second article of United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child states that all the parties should secure and guarantee the rights of children, irrespective of their ethnicity, race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin. We also have Article 8 of the Charter of the Citizen Rights, which says the government should refrain taking any step that may lead to widening the class divide or undue discrimination or deprivation of citizens from their basic rights. This includes the educational opportunities as well. We also have SINA, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Article 23. In the second part of this article, it is stated that every child shall be registered immediately after birth and shall have name right away. So this article clearly says every newborn child has a right to have a name right away. But unfortunately, in Iran, there is no executive guarantee. And there are several cases that the Iranian government violated this basic right. So we have several cases that the newborn babies, they couldn't get a name from the Iranian registration system for months, even like for years.
Okay, thank you very much, Behzad. Do you know if we have any framework within the Iranian legislation or Iranian regulations regarding the choice of name, freedom for the choice of name, or like any legislation regarding these fundamental rights?
Yes, there's one, way to circumvent this kind of problem or to solve this kind of issues. So let's say the parent, they choose a name, and according to Iranian registration system, this name is illegal, is considered illegal. It is usually the ethnic groups, they have this kind of issues. So if the system bans, they can file a case against the registration system, and they go and they provide the definition for the name, the grounds, the history of that name. They kind of like convince the court, and if the court votes in their favor, that they can take the court order and get the name they want from the registration system. But this is a long process. We have cases that it took more than 4 years. So it's not guaranteed that the children or the kid will have the name right away.
And also, I think that, Islamic names are not included in these non-Persian names due to the fact that the government structure is Islamic. And but any other ethnic names or non-Persian ethnic names are kind of struggling to be chosen for the newborn babies, and we have several examples of those. And regarding the solutions, I also was looking at the Human Rights Index, and whether, like, I was very curious if these international covenants that you mentioned are implemented or not. Then I saw that while it is technically possible to file non-discrimination complaints with the Administration of Justice Court and the Parliament's Article 90 Commission and committees for supervisions of implementation of the law on respect for legitimate freedoms and citizenship rights, but there is no evidence that judicial actions are taken in response to denial of fundamental human rights and freedoms on the basis of ethnic, cultural, or linguistic identities. So, yeah, thank you for bringing this up. So, what I'm also curious is that what problems these newborn babies or those families who are struggling to choose, have the freedom of choice for their baby's name, face.
So speaking about the problems, Sina, so of course in Iran, any service for citizenships are for citizens. So if there's a baby without any birth certificate or any identity, if they don't have a name, of course, they are deprived of public health services, such as like vaccinations. The newborn babies, they have several required vaccinations that they cannot get if they don't have certificate, right? So beside that, any hospital cost, since they cannot have insurance, it should be paid out of parents' pocket. Or later, if this process continues and they cannot get the birth certificate, they cannot enroll their child in the kindergarten or the school. So basically, these newborn babies, once they came to this world in Iran, they are deprived of very basic rights, including health, education, and any other like civil rights.
Thank you for the information. We had many examples in the past couple of years, and as AHRAZ, we got reports regarding the mostly Turkic origin names, so that these Turkish names such as Ayel, Anar, Sevgi, Yağış, Atakan, Oğuz, Atakan, Turkay, Tarkan, Anna, and so on, which are normal Turkish names, very, very beautiful names with like meaningful names, are deprived of getting a birth certificate, or at least some of these names that I have counted got their birth certificates, but after years of struggle, years of complaining, spending money to go to the main office of the civil registration or court in order to prove that this name has a meaning or this name is okay to be approved.
The irony is here, that although all of these names, so these people are living there in Iran for thousands of years, right? Although these names are Turkic and these names belong to the people which are local to that region, Iranian registration system consider these names as a foreign name. They don't consider these as Iranian name because they are not Persian.
Mm-hmm.
So the irony is here. So I wanted to add that.
Oh, thank you very much. This is actually a very important topic that we may even want to do a new podcast on it, a separate podcast on it, because this kind of ethnic discrimination that equates the definition of being an Iranian with being Persian, or like with the current government being Iranian as like just being a Shia Muslim, creates lots of problems for the religious minorities or ethnic groups or other groups that cannot fit their identity definitions within this definition. So what happens is that, they go through a huge struggle, which, as you said, arbitrarily deprives them of their basic rights. Yeah, thank you for bringing this up.
And actually, like when we tell minority, there's a there would be a misunderstanding. Actually, according to the officials, more than 70% of students, kids in Iran, they are non-Persian.
Mm-hmm.
So the Iranian registration system ignores 70%, at least 70% of the population.
Oh yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, very, very interesting issue is going on in Iran. This sense as well that minority, meaning that they don't have the equal share of power, political representation, or any kind of liberation or recognition. I mean, these groups are actually in number; they are in majority, not in minority.
Exactly.
Numerically, they are in majority, but what happens in terms of political representation or any kind of liberation, fundamental rights, and getting equal opportunities with the dominant group, then they are considered as minority, which is very weird and interesting. And they are suppressed most of the times easily due to the nature of this definition of being Iranian, as we discussed, right?
Exactly. So for the government, Iranian means Persian. So if you're not Persian, or if you promote any ethnic identity, you're not Iranian.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're gonna easily deprive you from your basic rights.
We had an interview last month with Huntai's parents. Huntai is struggling to get a birth certificate for about 3 years. So Mr. Taimaz, his father, gave an interview to us, and he mentioned some of the struggles that they are facing and how they are trying to overcome this problem. So let's listen to some parts of his voice, and then we will continue.
Normal insan haqları və ilkel gələksinimlər biri ana dildə uşaq adları qoya bilmək haqqıdır və bu haqqı əldə edə bilməmək bizim üçün çox mənəvi və maddi çəlişkilər yaradır. Ailələrə böyük həzinələr gətirir, yəni bu çox çətindir. Və idarələrdə sorumlular bu mövzuya gələndə biz onlara belə bir tozih veririk ki, bu bizim ilkel haqqımızdır. Bu qonu bizim kimliyimizin qorunmasına bir addımdır və bu qonuda da heç umudsuz deyilik. Biz yəni umudluyuq, bir gün bunu əldə edəcəyik və buna bənzər haqları əldə edəcəyik.
We heard Taimaz Mehralibeyli's interview with Ahraz, and we discussed actually many things beside this short part of the interview that you listened right now. And we discussed how they struggled to get a birth certificate for 3 years. We discussed what is the meaning of Huntai's name, and does it represent something to the culture of Azerbaijanis or Turkic people living in Iran. And we also discussed how did they documented these historical, cultural origins of this name to the civil registration. How did they got rejected many times, although they presented sufficient amount of evidence to the civil registration, and what problems they faced. These were key points that we discussed with them. So this is just one example of tens and hundreds of people living in Iran that they cannot fit their identity with the Iranian identity that is defined by the dominant discourse.
Exactly. We mentioned several cases from Azerbaijan, and these are actually the cases we know. So we only know the several limited cases. But in Iran, it's not only Azerbaijan, it's other ethnic groups, including Arabs, Kurds, Baluchis. They are all discriminated, and we have no information on the cases in their side.
Yes, you're right. And also we know only about those who choose to fight against this kind of discrimination.
Exactly.
And there are people who actually got forced to choose from the, that civil registration has a list of approved names and list of non-approved names. They are forced to choose a name arbitrarily from that list and to stop their struggle. And we never know about their stories just because of the fact that they like, of course, naturally, they don't want to go through this struggle.
Exactly, because filing a case, going to the court, it's costly in terms of money, in terms of like time.
Thank you very much, Behzad, for today's discussion. And we are going to have the same topic in Turkish this time as well. So we are going to introduce a new version of our AHRAZPod podcast, which is in Turkish language. And we are going to discuss the issues that already discussed in our English podcast. So please share our podcast if you liked it, and put your comments and suggestions below the posts that we are sharing this podcast. We believe that without respect for human rights and freedom of nations, peace cannot be achieved.